Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. It's my pleasure today to introduce Lee Hodgkinson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of OSTC. We're going to be talking about his business and how it has changed, it is changing, and it will change into 2021 and beyond. Before we do that, I would just like to congratulate Lee and his team on a couple of significant victories. Late last year, OSTC won the Proprietary Trading Firm of the Year award in our FOW International 2020 Awards. And Lee, who has been CEO for coming up to 3 years now at OSTC, was also voted the Chief Executive of the Year for 2020 for the work, the sterling work that he's doing leading OSTC through a transformation, which we will sort of come on to talk about. But to Lee and his team, sort of congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So first up, Lee, sort of in your time running OSTC, it's been fascinating to watch how you've diversified the business and positioned the business to explore new opportunities, one of which is the educational technology sort of arm of the business, which you've been sort of working hard to develop. And we'll come on to talk about VolCube and how that changes OSTC. But before we do that, perhaps we could just talk a bit about, or you could talk a bit about, why it makes sense to have this sort of educational technology arm as a complement to the trading technology, the trading business that we sort of traditionally would think of when we think of OSTC.
Yeah.
Why does the educational technology and the trading, why are they a natural complement?
So when I first arrived at the firm, I found some really amazing things. I was thinking about, diagnosing strategy, what were the capabilities and assets of the firm, and where would those assets and capabilities, create most value in the future, what the gaps were, all of that kind of good stuff. And what I found was that the core competencies of the firm, the kind of special sauce, was as much about training and education as it was about trading. Because actually, the founders, really did some remarkable and visionary things. They were out in Poland 15 years ago, as Poland was coming into the EU, working with universities to find young, talented and ambitious people, bringing them into the business, teaching them how to trade, and then creating the jobs on a trading floor, starting in Warsaw, and we ended up in 5 different offices, Poland, and then that business grew worldwide to what it is today. So it was interesting to me that they hadn't thought about learning and development and education and training through any other lens other than that's the best way to source talent for the trading business. And we had really great people, a lot of talent, great technology, and lots of assets related to training and education that was really special. And I knew from my exchange background how difficult it is to launch new products, or how difficult it was to get liquidity from new parts of the world. And I just started to think, actually, maybe if we looked at this educational capability through a different lens, we could start to think about monetizing it and externalizing it and turning it into a business line of its own. And that's where the Zishi, marketing brand came from. And, that was when this idea of building out, a capital markets wide education franchise developed. And of course, the important thing from a financial standpoint is it helps us bring in stable, sustainable and predictable revenues that help mitigate any downside risk from volatility in the trading markets. So it's been a fantastic voyage so far, And I think what we're starting to do now, a couple of years in, is really turn the screws on that business and grow it internationally. So, so far so good. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up as well.
Well, we'll come on to, Lee, talk about your plans, your hopes for the Zishi business in China, which I know is a market that you're exploring keenly. But before we do that, late last year you completed your acquisition of the Volcube business. Yeah. Perhaps you could talk to us, following on from what you were saying about the educational technology, could you talk to us about Volcube and how that transforms the OSTC proposition?
Well, that's it's a relationship that we had with the founders of that product for a number of years, predated my arrival, and those guys did a really good job in building that product. But I think about it this way. There are 1.7 billion people on planet Earth aged between 10 and 24 years old. And all of those people need education and they need jobs. And most of them aren't in, the major cities of the European Union or the US. They're out in Southeast Asia, in China, they're in India, and they're also in Africa. So I knew that our education business and our modus operandi generally of potential unbound to really create a platform for young people to get into the trading business. I know that that's that's out there in the emerging parts of the world. The question is, how do you reach them? And I thought with the experiences that we've all gone through with COVID, and the kind of transition rapidly to working from home, it just made perfect sense to me that we could learn from that experience and take a really accelerate 2 or 3 years of thinking around digital and outreach and how do we deploy remotely. We accelerated that into a few months, and gaining control of Volcube as a key asset in that area just made perfect sense. So there's a number of universities in Africa, for example, that we're talking to. Tremendous numbers of super smart young people coming out of universities in Africa. We're embedded in a couple of those universities that have now got Volcube that is opening up this kind of learning and development and gamification of trading so they can understand it. Well, who knows where that's going to lead? I mean, there's education possibilities, but we're going to start to see a talent pipeline coming through there. So just made perfect sense. And it was a good strategic fit for us. And, I think I'm very excited about where we can take that in the future in terms of other asset classes. But geographically, it's brilliant because you can just download the, from the URL and you're up and running. So as a product to get our distribution out there to universities and other, educational venues around the world is second to none.
One of your brand values, Lee, in your time at OSTC is collective excellence. Could you talk to us about sort of what that means and how the company has sort of embraced that idea to help it change and evolve in your time as chief executive?
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing, really. So again, when I joined OSTC, I was surprised pleasantly more about the things that I didn't find than the things I did. So one of the things I didn't find was I didn't find an alpha male macho culture. I actually found a very decent, humble, learning, respectful culture, which is at odds, I think, from the man or woman in the streets view of what trading's about. And what's really struck me was that everybody's job was meaningful. Every contribution that everybody made was important, and that struck me as being highly important, highly imperative to what we were trying to do. So there's, just because someone's a trader in the front office, well, that's great, and they're a revenue producer, and we respect that, but they're only in that seat because there's an IT person that's got the technology working to the highest standards of quality, that we've got the right finance people making sure capital's at the right clearing location at the right time, and there's enough there, that the regulatory compliance and risk people are keeping them safe. So no man is an island, and all that kind of thing. So it was really about the collective, none of us is as good as all of us model. And I really like that. They had a very, very strong culture, and because it came from almost an old school city partnership where the founders were paying for things out of their pockets, right? So everyone had to count. So that's become a very important part of our culture, and something that underpins our success, I think, because everybody's problem is everybody else's problem. We're all in it together, and everybody's success is everybody else's. So it doesn't matter what job you do, what your contribution is meaningful. Nobody's a number at OSTC. Everybody counts, and that people first mentality, I think, and we're a very purpose-driven organisation, I think is starting to make all the difference, because people want to come to work, and they want to know what they're doing matters. They want to do something meaningful, and they want to get paid fairly, and all of those good things. But fundamentally, the way that you create loyalty and you create a great long-lasting company is through treating your people decently. And you can be a high-performing business and treat people respectfully and have a collective outcome. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think that's something that, in many cases, many parts of the world of finance, we've forgotten. People think you can only be high performance if you're this kind of macho alpha male, and I just think we're a brilliant example of how that's just nonsense. And I think we've also been able to, from that base, drive our diversity and inclusion activities to really start turning the tide on a brilliant talent pool that has really been forgotten for far too long in financial services, whether that's from the perspective of gender or race, ethnic minorities. That there's so much more we can do. So yeah, it's very, very powerful stuff, but it's what makes us really strong.
That's really interesting to hear, Lee, what you were saying about the culture of the company and how the culture's changed, and that would reflect, I would argue, a bit of a broader trend within the industry towards maybe a more, I don't know, a more sort of collective, a more holistic view on how success is achieved, which is perhaps slightly at odds with what we might have expected from sort of previous generations. With that in mind, about the sort of cultural changes that the industry is undertaking, I know that OSTC has been sort of working very hard in terms of promoting diversity and inclusion. Could you perhaps talk to us about sort of how the company's changed in response to the efforts that you've made around diversity and inclusion?
Yep. So what was pretty clear in the financial crisis was that groupthink caused a lot of, very, very serious problems at many, many organizations. And so I think one of the culturally important things for any modern financial services company to be focused on is the avoidance of groupthink. It's very, very important. And so for me, diversity and inclusion and creating an environment that people want to join because they know they can be themselves and have a voice is absolutely imperative in the avoidance of groupthink. So there's a lot, I think there's a lot of press commentary about, the moral imperative, and that's important. But, I always say to people, we're not the moral arbiters of the world. We're not, around as leaders to tell people what they should be thinking, how, and what they should be doing. But we do have a responsibility to create great companies. And in doing that, you want an organization that attracts the very, very best talent and is able to retain the best talent. And it seems to me that the best way to do that is to be open and inclusive to everybody, bring those voices in, and then make sure that people can be themselves so that they're, performing at their best. And we know that, saying it scientifically, we know that organizations that are diverse in their thinking and their decision and their creative mindset perform better than those that aren't. So for me, it's just a no-brainer. Why would you want to, from the off, turn off the tap of talent from people that don't look or think the same as you? It's insane. And when you do bring people in, why would you clip their wings? You never hire someone with a set of technical skills and say, listen, this is fantastic, but just, that little part of those skills there, don't show those skills, whatever you do, because, people won't like that. It's madness. So I think long overdue, and we embrace it, not just because it's the right thing to do, because you get better outcomes. I watch, the executive team, I watched, teams of people at OSTC make far better, sustainable, more creative and profitable decisions now because we have more voices around the table than when I first arrived. So to me, it's just a no-brainer. I mean, really, and I, really call on the rest of the industry to get with a program. It's very, very easy to just stick with the status quo. Use the same search firms, talk to the same candidates. It's easy, right? And we always look for people that works in the same places. But I think that's just no longer going to create the kind of competitive advantage and the edge that successful companies are going to need in the future. Particularly for us, our lifeblood is young, talented, ambitious people. You have to be very, very clear with them that they're going to be able to fulfill their ambitions with you in all of their forms, not just, it's not like it was when I joined the city in 1989, where just get a job, get your head down and earn money. And the world's moved on, right?
And so with that in mind, looking at sort of nurturing ambition and sort of tapping into that sort of, the youthful sort of exuberance. I know that you've made some big steps in China recently, where you've hired some people to sort of grow the business there. You're setting up an office, and you're pushing particularly the Zishi brand in sort of Greater China. Could you perhaps, Lee, talk to us about what specifically are the opportunities for the Zishi business in sort of Greater China, and how you see that sort of playing out over the next sort of months and years?
Sure. I mean, I think that there's China specifically, and then there's kind of I think a broader set of evolving opportunities around the world. So in China, what we're seeing fundamentally is the emergence on the international stage of a massive capital market. And as those, we've all watched over the last 10 years of the derivative markets in China, emerge as they start opening up to the international community. I think there's tremendous advantage there. There's tremendous opportunity. And for a firm like OSTC to bring our skills and capabilities to those markets, I think can be great for all stakeholders. From a Zishi perspective, we think there are, there's just an enormous population of young people seeking to get vocational education, particularly in the finance industry. And we've got an international reputation, we've got products, we've got services that meet their needs. And we're very keen to, to deploy those services in China. We already do a lot of educational work for the exchanges on their derivative products. And essentially, I think there are kind of, there are three elements to this. One is a broader financial literacy angle for countries like China in the first instance. The second is upskilling the capital markets community, on some of the specialities of the derivatives business. And then the third thing is, back to my point about getting the youth population workplace ready. So there's an abundance of opportunity there. We're very excited about it. The same is also true in India, other parts of Asia. And in 2022, we'll be thinking a lot more concretely about Africa, where, again, if you look at the demographics of Africa, it's an extremely young population. I think that there are a number of countries in Africa that are starting to emerge as really interesting opportunities. Places like Nigeria, places like Ghana, very, very exciting opportunities. So again, for us, playing that education in financial services and job creation in the trading business, it's fantastic for us, and we're really excited about the growth opportunities there. So China, India, and Africa, I think also with the Middle East in certain parts, when we see what's happening, as a number of those economies are shifting away from fossil fuel driven businesses into a more rounded economy. I think there'll also be a lot of financial literacy opportunity there for our education business as well.
Okay, so Lee, looking ahead, I mean, we've talked about the educational side of the business. We've talked about diversity and inclusion and how important that is to the changing culture of OSTC. We've also talked about regional opportunities, geographic expansion. Sort of wrapping all that up, if you can. I mean, where does this all take us? Where do you think OSTC will be in, say, 5 years from now?
Well, I'd very much hope that we'd be a publicly listed company. I mean, I'm a big believer in the capital markets, and I would really like to see us operating on every continent on Earth meaningfully, both from an education and a trading perspective. But I also like to think that we could go beyond that, to really start offering a range of services and products and solutions to help the youth of the world really emerge, take control of their lives, learn, become educated, and then get into the financial services marketplace. So I know that sounds like a grand vision, but as we say, we're not here to tend a bonsai tree. We're looking to build a forest of oak trees. So it might take us a while, but we're on the right track at the moment.
Lee Hodgkinson, Chief Executive of OSTC, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thanks, Luke. Good to see you.